Welcome to our short discussion of the abnormal behavior of water and its thermal expansion or thermal contraction under different circumstances. Almost all liquids expand when they're heated. Ice cold water, however, does just the opposite. So between 0 degrees Celsius to 4 degrees Celsius, what we find is instead of expansion, which is shown from 4 Celsius up to 10 Celsius, it actually contracts. This is rather unusual because we see that it normally expands after 4 Celsius just like all other materials, but you get this weird behavior that occurs when it's at that very supercooled state. The explanation for this rather odd behavior has to deal with the crystal lattice structure of the water as it moves from being water at 4 Celsius to water at 0 Celsius. You see here's regular H2O liquid, but here's the H2O solid formation. So as the water moves from this pattern, which is rather irregularly shaped here, to this pattern, this a nice crystal lattice shape, you'll see that the molecules, the atoms, are now spreading apart and forming this crystal lattice pattern. And this is why we find that when it does this, the density of the ice starts to decrease as you get closer to 0 Celsius, and hence these molecules start to float up on the water. That's why we get this sort of crystal lattice pattern that forms a nice beautiful snowflake that you see often in snowflakes. And hence the water that becomes less dense starts to float up to the top, and so in the cold winter months you'll find that the coldest water will actually be near the surface here forming ice, and then actually go down in the pond from 0 to 4 Celsius. The more dense water, which is 4 Celsius, will be down here. If water didn't have this particular behavior, then what would happen is when winter came along, the water would freeze all the way straight down, and you can imagine what would happen to our aquatic life. So what happens is the water that is at the surface is the first to freeze. That's where you get the ice forming at the top of the lake, for example, and then as you get continued cooling, this will result in freezing of the water right next to the ice, which is at 0 Celsius, and so the pond will freeze from the top surface and move downwards and as you get thicker and thicker ice. Very, very deep lakes will be really the last to freeze because you have to really bring the whole lake down to a temperature of 4 Celsius before it starts to freeze at the top. So the water at the very bottom of the lake, if it's very deep, has to be 4 Celsius, and then as it moves to the very top surface, so this can be 0, and then it will start to freeze over. So we're pretty glad that water has this abnormal behavior. That way you can have fish all year round. And that's it for our little discussion of the abnormal behavior of the expansion of water.